Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest, and that's going to be Andy Swan. He's the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
No, it's great to be here, guys.
All right, so we're talking GM. Investor Day starts in about 45 minutes here. There's a lot of hype built up around this company. The stock's up about 29% this year. It's pulled back about 16% from those 19-year highs that we saw in June. This is based on a lot of the transformation and investment that they're making in EVs. And I believe, one of the catalysts that they have, and GM hasn't had one for a while, is Mary Barra, their CEO, who is transforming this company. What kind of data are you guys seeing on GM and the EV space from LikeFolio?
Yeah, I always like to start out with kind of the macro view and see, where is the overall consumer headed? And it's very, very clear that they're headed to electric vehicles. When we look at that, we'll see electric vehicle demand up 128% just year over year. So that's more than double where it was last year. Now, a lot of that's because of rising gas prices. A lot of that's because of the performance of the vehicles. It's just one of those spots where kind of everybody is headed. And so it is good to see GM want to be in that space. That's the good news. The bad news for GM is that so far they don't seem to be very good at it, which is a big problem. The Chevy Bolt in particular really struggling with recalls and so on due to the fact that its batteries can apparently spontaneously combust and create fires, and that really puts consumers off, as you can imagine. And so, we see the Chevy Bolt's consumer happiness levels at really miserable types of lows, the types of levels that we rarely see. In fact, we see several days where out of thousands of mentions of GM products, they did not have one. Or of the Chevy Bolt, they did not have one positive mention. Everything was negative because of this recall. And so they have a big hill to climb in terms of persuading the consumer that they can create a reputable vehicle that you actually want to drive. But in terms of where they're looking, electric vehicles are definitely the future. It's definitely creating lots of consumer demand. So they're looking in the right spot, but their execution is far from ideal at this point.
Yeah, Andy, this is kind of the theme that I wanted to take here with GM, and that is, now I'm a GM driver, full disclosure. I have a GM truck sitting in my garage, but getting into electric vehicles so far, when I think of the lyrics, "See the USA in a Chevrolet," nowhere in that song does it mean the car's going to catch on fire. I just don't see that in the lyrics. So that's a little bit of a problem if your car is catching on fire. Now, I don't think the Bolt is a very good looking car. I see them sporadically. These companies, Elon Musk has the prettiest car, right? And it's electric. And it's everyone that has them loves them. Ford is making an F-150 that's going to look just like the F-150, except it's going to be electric. The Mustang is looking pretty close to the old Mustang, but it's electric. GM's got to come out with a car that looks like the old car that people like, but it's electric, Andy. And this goes back to my big question, Andy. Does GM have the same problem that Walmart has in retail? And is they have kind of an identity crisis, and people don't trust them to get to the high-tech area like Tesla does, like all these, the other retailers like Amazon does in retail. Do they have an identity problem that holds them back from being the sexy new EV player?
Yeah, I think that they do. They have an identity problem, a lot like Walmart. I love your comparison there. They also have an inertia problem. In that it is really difficult to take very large, older companies and transform them. It takes some time. When we look at, the total mention volume comparison over the last 30 days of all these electric vehicles, You've got number 1 Cybertruck, number 2 the Model 3, number 3 Tesla Model S, number 4 BMW, then number 5 is the Chevy Bolt, but all of those mentions are negative because the cars are catching on fire. In fact, San Francisco parking lots are starting to ban Chevy Bolts from even parking in the lot because they see the risk to the other cars. And then you've got the Ford F-150 Lightning and then the Model X. So Tesla's completely dominated the mind share of this space. And for GM to break into that, it's going to take more than, really nice investor days. It's going to take cars on the road that perform really well for multiple years and that keep their inhabitants and others around them safe. And so there's a lot of catch up to do for GM, but it is one of those companies that has the capital and the wherewithal to do it. And the fact that they're pointed in the right direction, I think, is a good thing. A lot like Walmart, it's just going to take longer than it does for their competitors.
Yeah, and Andy, you bring up a good point here. Based on, we all know that the Tesla drivers and the Tesla fanboys and fangirls out there, they love, getting on social media and talking about those cars because they enjoy those cars. They like the lifestyle and the brand, right? They're aware there. But if you look at the divergence between what the analysts keep saying about GM, this has been a favorite this year of a lot of analysts. They're coming out and they're saying, hey, Mary Barra has transformed this company. They're going to invest X amount of dollars. They're going to be all electric by 2035. But if they don't have the right vehicles, to Kevin's point on here, do you see, from your data that their sentiment's going to continue to lag this overall space as more and more competitors against Tesla come into the fray?
Yeah, it's just really tough. I understand where the analysts are coming from, why you would be positive that GM is now focused on the future instead of, some might say they've been a little bit focused on the past. But it's very difficult for them to compete, at least in the short term, because the others have such an advantage. Even BMW and Ford's F-150, that Lightning, everybody thinks that looks really cool. And, it's very true to the original cool F-150 brand. It just happens to be electric and have some room up front. So I think, GM could follow a little bit of Ford's lead in that and take some of their more popular vehicles. I think that's probably what they're going to do. The Cadillac and the Hummer, I think, are next. But it's tough to buy a Cadillac if you see that the batteries in the Bolt are exploding. And so they have to get that under control first and foremost. I think that they will eventually, but the brand perception is really tough to overcome, and they have a long road ahead of them. Now, can they do it? And is the current leadership the ones to do it? I think the street thinks so. And so we'll just have to wait and see. But I don't see any reasons from a consumer perspective at this point to believe the hype that Wall Street is putting around this transformation of the company. They just haven't proven it with consumers at all at this point.
Andy, one more quick question, and that goes to, does the electric vehicle market need billions or trillions of dollars in infrastructure before they're ready to really explode onto the world? Because, I don't see any charging stations anywhere. Don't we need to see charging stations other than your garage so you can just drive around locally? Don't we need on-the-road charging stations for you to be able to drive from LA to Las Vegas or Chicago to the UP or Louisville to Chicago? Don't we need more things that really I don't see yet? We're on a good path. We're starting out at a good place, but aren't we just in the first inning of this big electric vehicle baseball game?
Yeah, we are in the first inning, but I think that your premise is wrong. As a Tesla driver, I charge my car every night, and I can get to Nashville, from Louisville, which is a couple hundred miles. I could get to Chicago with one stop. It's really not that big of a deal. The thing with it is, because there's power station in every garage, it actually reduces the number of charging stations or gas stations the world needs in general. So that real estate is going to be a really interesting thing that's happening right now, because you don't need a gas station every quarter mile in the city if everybody's car is fully filled up at home. It's like if we had gas pumps
Right.
in our houses, we wouldn't need those. We need them in specific spots along interstates. Tesla's built out a pretty good supercharging network. You could pretty much go New York to LA. And so I think that's more the play is how does GM build out that confidence in their consumer base? Yes, there's infrastructure gains to be made. And yes, these supercharging stations have to get faster. Sometimes it can take 30 minutes to charge up, which is unacceptable for a lot of consumers.
Right.
So those things have to happen. But from a, points on the map perspective, I think it's far smaller than most people think.
Oh, and by the way, I was just out in California, Kevin. If you want some idea, I couldn't find a gas station to fill up my rental car before I got back to the airport because all there was charging stations on the way to the airport. So, yeah, I think that's a Chicago, Illinois type of situation that we're in. Always a step behind, Kevin, always a step behind. All right, Andy, thank you so much for the data from LikeFolio. Appreciate it. Have a good day.